Greetings people, this is Top Cat Jimmy and thank you for tuning in to my channel. This is my latest video series here in February of 2017 titled Mastering Your Own Tracks and or Mixes, to or not to, that is the question. Now I would like to bring some clarity to this matter in question because I do believe it is a bit foggy, a bit murky, and a bit muddled up. First, I would like to touch on the word question. There's two words that I see in there, the word quest and the word ion. Now, those are two different words. Now, the word question comes from the Latin word querere, from where we get our same word quest, which also comes from the very same Latin word, querere. So, the idea of mixing and or mastering, I do believe, is a quest. It can seem a bit daunting and challenging. Now, the word ion simply means an atom or a molecule. Now, an atom, as we learned in school, is made up of electrons, protons, and neutrons. An ion is an atom or a molecule that has either less electrons than the number of protons in it or more electrons in it than the number of protons in it. In other words, not the same equal amount as. When the atom or molecule has less electrons in it than the protons, that atom or molecule ends up with a negative electrical charge in it. And if that atom or molecule has more electrons in it than there are protons, that atom or molecule ends up with a net positive electrical charge. Now, perhaps the word ion and the word question here, that syllable in that word question, perhaps that ion is just a homonym of the word ion that I just expounded on to you. What I see in that word question, the word quest and question are the same difference. And in this quest of mixing and mastering, do we end up with, I would like to propose, do we end up with a negative electrical charge in our efforts and our progress of our music, or do we end up with a net positive electrical charge? Do we end up with a less than result, or do we end up with a more than result? And then therefore adding to our repertoire of the things that we have made the effort for and strove for and achieved and gained in our music journey, to go from taking up an instrument to perhaps composing and then recording. Now, what about mixing and mastering? To add to what we have already achieved and to therefore grow the way we grew, and to keep on growing in our musical journey, and to be, as Mr. David Will from ProAudioDVDs.com states, and whom I like to refer to quite often because I believe he is a master audio engineer and he has the credentials to back it up, that, like he says, be a lifelong learner. So since we've taken up a musical instrument and perhaps found that we could compose, and then we decided to record, we just knew we had to record. We needed to record. We wanted to record. And then to say, wow, not knowing really anything much about the field of music, what it was going to consist of or contain, to find out that now when we record, there is such thing as mixing, and then to find out there's a such thing as mastering. So then, do we just stop there at recording and not go any further? How are we going to bring our music to its full fruition if we just stopped at recording? What about, therefore, mixing and adding some improvement on it, and then the mastering and adding even more improvement on your work and your efforts and your music even more? So that's what I'd first like to bring our attention to. I know that may seem a bit dramatic and poetic, and some might even say deep, who knows. But the thing of it is, this matter, I do believe, has been foggy and murky and muddled up. Okay? So, to continue in our quest and our journey, yes. Now, when we first started out, we said, I just want to record this stuff. I know, or when I did so, I didn't know to expect mixing. I did not know to expect mastering. I did not even know that those two things even existed until I really started doing some more serious recording than just on my, though it was serious, but simply on my cassette tape recorder that I had purchased to record on initially, to then buy a little home recording studio Memorex machine recorder that records onto a flash drive in mono, all right, and then to go and purchase the TASCAM DP24, and then from there realizing, wow, there's mixing involved in this recording, and there's mastering involved in this mixing and in this recording, and now, wow, there's more to do. So to conquer the challenge rather than to shrink back from it, which in that case I'd like to bring your attention to my last video series titled How to Create and Fully Produce a Song in 4 Days, which I have a 4-day, 4-video series with that. And therefore my song I created in that series titled Starting from Scratch, and that I developed that model to create and fully produce a song in 4 days. And in doing so, I met that challenge, and even more so, I felt that I conquered that challenge. And so therefore, I decided to create an album or LP titled Conquering the Challenge. Okay, so I'm going to get technical, because in our language with each other as in this music field, then I know we throw around these terms in a general manner of speaking. And in doing so, perhaps the other person does know what we mean, but to make sure that there's no loss in our communication, that we are certainly on the same page with each other when it comes to doing these things, in order to speak the language, then I think we need to use these terms properly and in the order of which things are actually done, so there's no misunderstanding. So let me explain and give you the prime example here. First of all, there is an order of things when it comes to music. And in military terms, it would be called SOP, or Standard Operational Procedure. There are steps that we take, and we ought not be trying to change conventional, tested, and proven principles of wisdom when those who went before us and that are before us in these things have already discovered so much and laid out the principles, and therefore can save us a lot of frustration, save us a lot of effort, and save us a lot of time. Not that we should not go about testing things, because I believe we ought to test things. But we also need to think, okay, and use deep thought into these things as well. Let's put some extra thought into these things. Now, as far as the technical and the order of things, let me start by saying, number one, we record our tracks. Number two, we mix our tracks. And number three, we master our mixes. All right? We do not master our tracks, we mix our tracks. Okay? And in mixing our tracks, of course, we take each and every individual track and we add the effects on them in that particular track. And so in mixing, there are a number of things involved. Setting the volumes in the tracks, each individual track per area, higher or lower, or keeping it there where it was recorded at that level, one of those three. And it varies, and it may vary throughout the track or not, and then each and every individual track. And then, of course, setting the pans, editing out any flaws that may be a bit too much, crossfading perhaps, adding the effects, and then balancing all them out with each other in every one of those things that I mentioned, so that there's no conflict, so that everything sounds like a symphony and in harmony instead of a cacophony where it sounds like chaos, but rather sounds harmoniously beautiful. And then, have you ever heard of the saying that our mixes are not finished until they are mastered? So as the question here is to or not to, I would also like to bring your attention to the fact that one of the main things that caused me to start the series is because there are those out there that say that you or me or we, whoever, that we should not master our own mixes. There are those people out there saying that and telling you that. So therefore there is a question. There is more than one question. The questions are, should I or shouldn't I master my own mixes? Do I or don't I master my own mixes? Can I or can't I master my own mixes? So as far as I'm concerned, should I or shouldn't I is quite dogmatic as far as saying should or should not. And when someone says they should not, that is certainly being dogmatic. Now, not that there's anything wrong with dogma, but now we're starting to get into an area where when someone says you shouldn't, then where is the justification for that? And if they have any justification for it, then fine. So my other thing I would like to point out here and interject is there any justification for anyone saying that you should or should not? So shouldn't there be a question going, well, why not? Why not? And what is your justification for saying so that we should not? So yes, there's another way of a quest, because that is a challenge. So for someone to say that you should not, where's your challenge question? Such as, well, why shouldn't I? The other thing is, do I or don't I? Because now, when someone says that you shouldn't, that might have shooken your faith a little bit. The other thing is, can you or can't you, has to do with not only permission, but ability and confidence. Now, Do you need someone's permission to mix your own tracks? Do you need someone's permission to master your own mixes? I asked you that question. My answer to that is I do not believe that you need permission to master your own mixes. Hey, look. Who gets the greatness? Who gets the credit? Who gets the Grammy Awards? Okay? And when it comes to the engineers in the studios, when a Grammy Award is won by a musician or a band, then there is a Grammy handed to also who in the studio that did the work, who did the audio work on that song. That Grammy Award goes to that mastering engineer. So do you need someone's permission to be great? Have you ever heard of the saying that if you want to achieve greatness, stop asking for permission? For someone to say that you should not master your own mixes is the same difference as saying you do not have permission to master your own mixes. And that's what this is about, mastering your own mixes. Now, also, that if you cannot master your own mixes, how are you ever going to be expected to be able to master someone else's mixes? So my inference is that if you can be talked out of mastering your own mixes, then someone's attempting to talk you out of ever being able to master someone else's mixes. Wouldn't that go to speak of and smack of competition? That if someone can eliminate others from competing, to me, that is possibly what that could be about. It's possible for someone to put a message out there saying that you should not master your own mixes, or anyone else's for that matter, therefore. That is a psychological way of warfaring to eliminate competition, or an attempt at it. So why shouldn't you master your own mixes, or someone else's for that matter, if you're confident enough after having mastered your own mixes and gotten some experience? More work for you means less work for them. So why shouldn't you be going for it? Hey, you came this far. You've taken up an instrument. You've possibly composed. You've recorded. You've mixed. Now all of a sudden you're supposed to stop, and you've made it 4/5 of the way in this race. And now you're not expected to finish and cross that finish line and perhaps win the grand prize, take first place, at least over your own mixes? Don't you want to finish your race? Don't you want to finish each and every race that you're in and that you enter into? In every one of your songs, let's say, to mix them and to master them and finish your race with your finishing touches on them. Now also, this video is not about you or anyone else not having someone else mix your tracks. I'm not against it. Also, this video is not about not having someone else master your own mixes if you mix them. This video is not about not having someone else master your own mixes. This video is about, do you mix your own tracks? And this video is about, do you master your own mixes? Or would you like to? Do you want to be able to mix your own tracks? Do you want to? Would you like to be able to master your own mixes? My channel is about you can do it. You've come this far. Now, if you'd like to have someone mix your own tracks, be your own guest and be my guest. If you want to have someone else master your own mixes, then be your own guest and be my guest. I'm not opposed to those things at all whatsoever. I'm going to say, though, this video does address those who say that you should not mix your own tracks, and this video does address those who say that you should not master your own mixes. This is something I've heard throughout my years here in music and on YouTube, and something that stuck in my craw. And finally, after these years, a few years, I've heard this on and off throughout my time in my studio, on YouTube. Not directly to me, but on YouTube. Nevertheless, if that's the case, it's speaking to me, yeah? It's speaking to you. It's speaking to anyone and everyone that can hear. And so finally, I had the time free, and I thought, what project do I want to do next? And so immediately this came to the top of my mind and my list. Okay? It says, what about that thought of dealing with that claim that someone says that you should not master your own mixes? I will go on to say that if that's the case, then should we even be recording our own performances? Should we even be mixing our own recordings? Should we even be doing any of that? All right, so furthermore, we've talked about mixing, and it is daunting and it is challenging, okay? It is a lot of work. It takes an effort. And particularly when you're aiming, and I'm sure you are, to get it right, to sound its best. Now let's talk about mastering. Mastering, daunting, yes, and challenging, indeed. But so is mixing. Mixing is no less daunting and challenging than mastering is. No less. Let me repeat that. Mixing is no less daunting or challenging than mastering is. Now, because I said that, I would like to say this. Once again, I would like to reiterate. So if you should not be mastering your own mixes and or tracks, may I say, based on that philosophy, based on that so-called logic, then that would go to speak and imply, not that I'm saying this, but that would imply also, in my opinion, that you or me or any of us should definitely not be mixing our own tracks. If we should not be mastering our own mixes, then we should definitely not be mixing our own tracks. It's implying that you should not be mixing your own tracks either. That goes to say. And to back that up, I also want to add that mixing a track is done exactly like mastering a mix is. Once again, mixing a track is exactly like mastering a mix. I would also like to say, and I'm going to say it, mixing is the hardest part. Now, to clarify, to back that up, imagine that you have X amount of times that by 8 tracks or 9 tracks or 24 tracks or 48 tracks or however many you may have. That when you master a mix, you're adding an overall master effects rack on what? Okay, back this up a bit. A mixing engineer will take his mix or her mix, okay, like you see right up there on my screen, that's a mix. And the mixing engineer takes every bit of that and simply renders it into a stereo wave file. One. So that when the mastering engineer does their job, they receive what? That stereo wave file. One stereo track. One. And what do? What does the mastering engineer do? they add that master effects rack. They add that overall master effects rack to one track. And they're going to add EQ, compression, most likely reverb, some stereo imaging, and a limiter on it. But imagine the mixing engineer has to do that times 8 tracks, times 9 tracks, times 24 tracks, times 48 tracks, as far as the same difference, but without the stereo imager on it. And the limiter will be there at their discretion per each track. But definitely, the mixing engineer is definitely going to use EQ and compression, possibly reverb, no stereo imaging, because I'll put it like this. I mix in mono. In other words, every one of my tracks, though I record, and by default they record into stereo, I re-render those tracks into mono each and every individual time. Each and every individual recording, each and every individual track. I re-render those stereo tracks into mono tracks, and that's what you see there up on my board. All right? Now here you go. Then I mix in mono. So then, therefore, there's no use for a stereo imager on those individual tracks. They're not stereo wave files, they're mono. But when you get a stereo wave file, such as the mastering engineer receives, that is a stereo audio file, and therefore now stereo imaging is necessary. Now it makes sense to use that. Okay? So the thing of it is, if you can mix your own tracks, can you? Have you? Then you have the ability. Now look, I'm going to say that if you can mix your own tracks, you can definitely master your own mixes, because you did the hardest part. I'm going to also add in here, people, that, I'm going to say it, the mixing is the hardest part. The mixing is the hardest part of all of this. You do more work in mixing than you do mastering, because you're doing the same thing you would be doing in mastering, except for the stereo imager and whatnot. But you're doing it in 8 tracks or 9 tracks, 24 tracks and 48 tracks, and then you're having to set the pans and the volumes. Look, that's where all the hard work is done. And if you can accomplish that, then you can definitely, master that mix. Simple as that. And therefore conquer the challenge that you started out with. Why do you want to climb a mountain and get near the summit and near the peak and then stop and not go to the top and plant your flag? Can you imagine these mountain climbers climbing Mount Everest? They say, well, I'm only going to climb Mount Everest to only go to this point right before the summit peak, but I'm going to stop there, and then I've reached my goal. Can you imagine them saying that? Or do they say, no, I'm going to the top and finish it? Now, let's back off a little bit and just talk about mixing, and mastering. So, if you do not want to mix your own tracks, hey, that's your business. That's your prerogative. That is your right, and that is your call. And that's fine. That's fine. I understand. But you don't even need my understanding, to not have to mix your own recordings or not mix your own tracks. You don't need anyone's permission to or not to. And if you want to have someone else master your own mixes, then, like I said, be your own guest. Be my guest. You don't need my permission. You don't need anyone's permission to or not to have someone else master your own mixes. That's your call. That's your prerogative. That's your business. Just exactly the same way as mine is. It's my call if I want to have someone else mix my tracks, or if I want someone else to master my mixes. I do not have a problem with that. As a matter of fact, yeah, please help me out. Help take the load off. Be my guest. Now, I'm also going to say that I encourage you that if you want someone else to mix your tracks, please do. And there are some awesome mix engineers out there. Wow. There's lots of places you could just send your raw recordings to, okay, individual tracks, let's say at least that much, have that much, okay? And then you can send those to those mixing engineers that will do a wonderful, great job of mixing your hard work and your beautiful song that you recorded. And then, yes, they probably have mastering engineers there too. So yes, then you can have them master that mix that professional mixing engineer, let's say professional, hopefully at least, mixing engineer mixed. And so that also I want you to send that to your mastering engineer in your studio and have them master that mix, please. All right, so that I can take my raw recordings and have them sound beautiful, because really the hard work is really done in the playing of the instrument, the composing of the song, and the performance of that song. To me, that's hard work, and you do not want to lose any of that. You actually, if you're like me, you want to take that you believe to be a beautiful song that you work so hard on bringing into existence. You want someone to protect your investment, your treasure, your effort. You want them to bring the best out in it. So yes, in that case, I say yes, please do. If you don't want to mix your own tracks, and have someone else do it. And if you don't want to master your own mixes, have someone else do it. And the thing of it is, here's the thing. But if you want to mix your own tracks, I'm just saying you can. And I hope that I'm inspiring you with confidence. And if you want to master your own mixes, I believe you can. And I'm attempting to inspire you with confidence. Okay, people, well, this is Top Cat Jimmy, and this is video installment number 1 of this series, Mastering Your Own Tracks and/or Mixes, to or not to, that is the question. Please stay tuned and look for my video number 2 and the other videos to go along with this series. I will be showing you the differences in these DAWs, the sound with these plugins, and to also show you in these videos the unmixed version of this song starting from scratch, real briefly, then showing you basically the mixed version briefly, and then taking it from there and allowing you to hear the difference in the plugins and the different DAWs. I'm going to show you how I mastered this song, what plugins I used, and whatnot. You'll hear the differences between the mixed tracks and the mastered tracks. Okay? Now, you've heard the saying that if your song is mixed but your mix is not mastered, then it is not finished. Well, keep that in mind. You've done a lot of hard work on your music. And like I said, I'm going to show you how I mastered this song. I'm going to show you basically how to master, because if you can get the basics down, you're good. I'm going to be going over some details about the mixing, of course, the essentials, and also I am going to show you the post-mastering process. So once it's mastered by the mastering engineer, is it done yet? No, it's not done yet. There is the post-mastering process, which I will show you how that's done. I will be doing that with my software and showing you what it is and how to do it. Also, I will be interjecting in there, in that post-mastering process, there is also, after the mastering engineer does their work, that how you check it for clipping with another software. If there's any clipping, how to immediately get rid of it with no negative effects and no negative results on your audio quality. A very quick, effective, and simple way to get rid of any clipping whatsoever. Now, the whole idea is, rule number 1 is to capture it clean, keep it clean throughout the song, okay? Next of all, keep the levels right so that there's no clipping in your mixing. When you set up the mix, make sure there's no clipping. You mix and render the track, therefore there's not going to be any clipping. Send it to the mastering engineer, there is no clipping. Then the mastering engineer and all the work that they do and everything they add in there, that they make sure that there's no clipping, and then they render it. Yet, it still must be checked anyway, and I will show you how to check it in a software, very simply, very quick, and to see if there's any clipping at all whatsoever, and if by chance there is, how to simply, like I mentioned, how to simply, effectively, and quickly get rid of that clipping with no loss of audio quality to your song. All right, and there we take it from there and finish the post-mastering process, which will include tagging, which includes digital information in there, also a photo in your song, so when it plays online, anywhere, your photo can come up on it, etc. How to take that, and therefore you're going to want to render it into an MP3, but once it's rendered into an MP3, it may be a large file size, and a way to actually bring that file size down through another piece of software that I'm going to show you. So the mixing engineer, recapping, they render their mix into a stereo WAV file. The mastering engineer receives that, and then once their work is done, they render it into a stereo MP3 file so that it can be played on a digital player. All right? So we take it from analog to digital. Alrighty? And then publishing it online. I will show you my TASCAM DP24. I will show you also the mix down process, how simple it is. I will also show you how to mix down this same song that I have started from scratch, also in not only those 3 DAWs, but also my TASCAM DP24, and show you the mix down process, how quick that can be done. Also the mastering process, how quick that can be done. Then my TASCAM DP24 has a CD burner in it. It can burn it down into a CD. Then you can take that master CD and also not only have an MP3 version of it, but also on a CD, and then put it on, let's say, duplicating towers and mass produce your CD. Also, then I want to show you, and I want to talk a bit about MIDI and a bit about MIDI sync. All right, just a bit about it and how simple and easy it is on one of those 3 DAWs that I have to do the MIDI sync with your MIDI device. Very simple, very quick, very easy. I love it in that particular DAW, and that how TASCAM DP24 has MIDI sync capability. Now, is the TASCAM DP24 a control surface? I'll put it this way. It does have MIDI sync capability. You can read the manual in DP24. It says so about MIDI sync, that in other words, your TASCAM DP24 has MIDI sync and can be read by your DAW. Now, I just want to touch on that as well. All right, and I will bring you through this process step by step, real briefly from beginning to end, and I will keep it clear and simple and straightforward. Okay, we will be able to get this done. So this is Top Cat Jimmy. My YouTube channel is about you can do it. All right, recording and mixing and even mastering tutorials. Keeping it simple. You can do it. Thank you for tuning into my channel. Please look for my other videos to go with this series. I say God bless you, sayonara, adios, and we'll see you again the next time.